Welcome to the only daily podcast focusing on compliance news of the day. Each morning, start your day with a cup of coffee and Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, to hear about 4 of the top compliance, corruption, or leadership stories you will need to start your day. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
First, a word from our sponsor. The Daily Compliance News for October 31, 2022. Yes, it's Halloween. The TuSimple in Too Much Trouble edition. We begin with that story from the Wall Street Journal as the self-driving trucking company TuSimple faces federal investigation into whether it improperly financed and transferred technology to a Chinese startup. There are concurrent probes by the FBI, the SEC, and CFIUS, which are examining TuSimple's relationship with a Chinese startup. So, I guess now we're just giving them our secrets. Next up from Reuters, first of 2 stories. Polish Airline PLL LOT on Friday asked a federal judge to declare it a crime victim in the Boeing 737 MAX criminal case, a move that could make the airline eligible for significant compensation. Last week, the judge ruled that families of crash victims were crime victims, and he'll determine what remedies should be imposed. The airline argues it should have the same rights as the victim's family, arguing it lost nearly $250 million in damages related to the 14 737 MAX airplanes it owned at the time of the crash and grounding. Next up, our second article from Reuters. The Ecuador Energy Minister, Xavier Vera, resigns amid a corruption investigation. Yet another Ecuadorian minister has resigned due to corruption, and for him, it's acquisitions. He arranged jobs at the state oil company Ecuador in exchange for bribes. So, Ecuador, once relatively good and clean, now sure seems to be having a lot of problems. And our final story comes to us from ESPN. On Friday, Spanish prosecutors dropped all fraud charges and corruption charges against Brazilian forward Neymar and all others accused over his transfer from Barcelona to Barcelona from Santos. Prosecutors had sought a 2-year prison term for Neymar and a payment of 10 million euros in a case bought by a Brazilian investment firm, which owned 40% of the rights to Neymar. The Spanish prosecutor said that there was not the slightest hint of a crime and asked that all defendants be acquitted. The prosecution literally folded. So you have to really wonder why this case was even brought. If it's a civil matter by the investor, that's one thing, but pushing them to try a criminal charge really seems beyond the pale. Happy Halloween. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network and a proud member of C-Suite Radio. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.